right, everybody, welcome to another developer interview live here on the Game Wisdom channel where we talk and discuss the art and science of games. I am Josh Placer, and joining me tonight from New Blood Interactive, he is, of course, the guy who manages a lot of very weird Twitter posts, as well as talk about games. And he's on to discuss what's been going on. So, please welcome Dave Oshry. How are you doing?
Hey, how's it going, man?
I am doing great. How is everything with you?
Great, new year, new blood, new games, new nonsense. Yeah, it's gonna be a really busy year for us, so everything's going well. We had a long break, we had a really busy end of last year with the Dusk Switch launch and then the holiday season. And then, everybody kind of chilled out for a bit, spent some time with their families, and now we're ramping up for 2022, which is the year it actually is, which is nuts.
Yeah, I know. It still feels like it. Like we enjoy it. Still, it feels like 2020. Like it doesn't feel
Yeah,
like
it's still
things.
2019, right? We haven't
I
done
wish.
anything in 2 years.
Yeah. But it's great to chat with you again. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, we interviewed Dave. I think this was back in
Been a while,
2018.
yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and we did a chat with David, of course, the developer behind Dust. That
Clancy,
would
yeah.
be, I think that was like November or December of last year, and we were going to try and get both Daves on. We couldn't just get the time zones right.
It's all because I'm in New Zealand now, right? And
Mhm.
David's on in Pennsylvania, East Coast US. So
Mhm.
he is 17 hours behind me or something. I like to say he's 6 hours ahead yesterday. That's how I do it in my head.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's hard with the time zones with kids and families and stuff for us. We can't even do our own podcast. It's just
Uh,
like the time zones are just like not in our favor.
I know, like with the developers I've interviewed, because I interview people from literally all around the world these days, that it can be a nightmare. Like, I've been trying to get more like roundtable discussions going with like multiple developers, and it's great when you have one in Australia, one in California, one
Yeah.
somewhere in Europe, and it's like, when are you free? Like I'm like
Yeah, it's so
3 a.m.
hard.
Yeah, but yeah, at some point though, it would be great to have both you guys on because I'm sure we'll get a whole lot of weird conversations that way.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, if we could ever get together at the same time.
Yeah. But it's great to have you back on, and we still have a lot to discuss. For the people watching us live, if you do have any questions for Dave or comments, be sure to get them in. We have our lovely little chat at the bottom there. But
Get them in.
there you go.
Sorry, I just pulled up
No,
the chat.
I know that always happens with you two. But to get things, I guess, started for tonight, since you've already been on, what has been like happening with like New Blood? Like for people who aren't familiar or maybe just know you for like very recently, like what's happening with the studio and some of the games you're working on and publishing?
Yeah, well, so last year a lot of what we did was, learning how to do Switch porting, and we did a really good job with Dusk on Switch. I'm really proud of that, even though it did take us 3 years. So this year is going to be more console ports, as well as Gloomwood early access. Finally, Fallen Aces early access. We have demos out for both of those games, but we're working towards the early access versions. And we take early access and demos just as seriously as full launches. We want them to be as polished and have as much content as possible, so people are happy. So those two games are going into early access. Medieval, the Black Labyrinth, the prequel expansion pack for Medieval. We're going to get that out this year. Faith, the Unholy Trinity. Hopefully by Halloween, it'd be nice to get that out. Chapter 3 is almost just about done. So now we have to stitch it all together into one complete game. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 with all the extras and everything. Um, what else? Dusk finally getting the SDK and Steam Workshop out, and then co-op, and then just continuing to update Dusk forever and ever, and listening, and then more console ports, Xbox, PlayStation. Starting to work on some VR stuff, a medieval VR. Just basically trucking along, just keeping getting stuff. Just keep working. We work at our own pace. We take our time, which is why our games are good. People like us. Um, so just more of that, but yeah, last year like no real big releases. I think the only new release we did last year was Dusk 82, which was like a fun little companion game we did for Dusk. A little demake that David made, we turned into a full game. But this year we've got like a lot of major releases with Gloomwood, Fallen Aces, Faith, the Black Labyrinth. Um, yeah. So it's going to be a big year for us if we get everything done. Who knows?
I'm definitely looking forward to a lot of those games. I play the demos for Gloomhaven. I have Ultra Kill. I've been saving for.
Oh yeah, I forgot Ultra Kill Act 2. Yeah, that as well.
Oh, Gloomwood, yeah.
Yeah. Ultra Kill Act 2 is also this year. How did I forget about Ultra Kill? It's literally our most popular game. But yeah. Sorry, continue.
No problem. Oscar in chat wants to know Gloomwood when.
Gloomwood when early access this year for sure. We're almost done adding ridiculous systems to it now, so it's finally content. We're trying to make sure the early access version has enough content in it that you'll be able to get a few hours out of it and really get good bang for your buck. Early access is, the Gloomwood demo was like 45 minutes, right? So we want to really make sure that the early access version gives you a really good first slice of the game, and then we can also make sure we have a good cadence. So you're not waiting another year for the next early access update, right? We don't like doing that. We try to at least keep it consistent, even though sometimes it is what it is. But yeah, now that all the systems are really in place, we're building out the areas that you're going to have. So the fishery, and then the caves, and then the market district and the lighthouse. So we're trying to build all that out to really give the first bit of Gloomwood that we give you of the actual game, make sure it's like a nice sizable chunk. So when, I don't know, I'm hoping like around E3 time. We've had this thing going with PC Gamer for like 3 years. I don't know if you've seen the PC gaming show. It's kind of become this running joke about bumping Gloomwood and stuff like that. So now that it's year 3, maybe it'll be like they'll finally let us show Gloomwood. Maybe that's when we'll launch the early access. But it all depends. David and Dylan are working away on it. David just got back from Florida where he was swimming with the manatees. And we just brought on Nate Behrens as another developer to help work on Gloomwood as well. We got some great external talent on it now. We've got brought in some new 3D modelers, some new animators to help speed that stuff along. So David and Dylan can just focus on the level design and the world building, and not like UI and rigging.
And speaking about Fate, we did interview that developer as well. I think it was back in September or October last year. And that was yeah. So definitely a lot of very interesting games. I think one thing that's interesting about New Blood is just how much you guys have kind of like diversified a lot of the games you've been publishing, especially again compared to 3 years ago when we last spoke. And
yeah, I'd like to think so, and it's not like it was like deliberate. There was a time when we were kind of more of a publisher before we got on the current track we are now. But like if we were that, we would just publish like every retro shooter, because like we get pitched every single one.
Sure.
And we decided that we really didn't want to do that. And we figured out that we had enough talent that we could just make whatever games we wanted internally at this point. And I'm trying to make sure that all our games are different from each other, right? Because there's a lot of games in this retro revival scene that kind of just blend together these days. And, I want to make sure that every game we work on or take on is, a little different, demonstrably different than the others. Obviously, Dusk is kind of picks and chooses from, all these great retro shooters. The Medieval is obviously a lot like Hexen and Heretic. Ultra Kill is obviously like a mashup of like Doom and Devil May Cry, and then we've got stuff like Gloomwood, which is an homage to stuff like Call of Cthulhu and Resident Evil and Thief, and then Fallen Aces, which is also kind of like that, but also adds a bit of Condemned in there. It's more of a melee brawler, but still an immersive sim. So we had like the New Blood FPS trilogy, which is Dusk and Medieval and Ultra Kill. And now we've kind of got the two New Blood immersive sims with Fallen Aces and Gloomwood. And as well, we want to do more horror stuff, or even just more narrative stuff, because we like it. So obviously Faith, we did Kyle is Famous, Johnny Szymanski's game. And then Johnny and Airdorf are going to be working on, we teased it last year, they're going to be working on a Faith visual novel, right? So we're gonna turn Faith into like an anime dating sim. And we want to do stuff like that too. We teased a lot of stuff last year at E3, a car combat game, a top-down shooter, an isometric CRPG, and these are all just things we're building internally that we're hopefully going to turn into full games. But it all depends. But I I like to think that we're really branching out into the thing about New Blood is we do whatever the fuck we want, right? And our motto is we hate money, right? We don't actually hate money. We need money to live and survive. But we've gotten to the point where what we mean by that is like we're not motivated by money, right? We don't do things because oh this will sell, or like oh this is the hot genre right now. Let's do that because that'll sell a lot of like we don't give a shit about that. We want to make like the more money we make, the more weird shit we do. Like we want to put Dusk 82 on like Game Boy Advance. Like I want to make I want to make a light gun game. Like I want to like we want to do like we want to make soap for the collector's edition. Like we're we like we're lucky enough to be able to do that, to do what we want. So we're gonna keep doing that. So when we say like we hate money, it means that like we can take our time and do the kind of games we want to make. Um, because like no, like if we were looking for a publisher, like no publisher would like I don't know fund games like Gloomwood or Fallen Aces or like they'd some indie publisher might, but it's nothing we can't do ourselves. Hey Papa, there's Saul. He's going to his bed. Hey Saul, you're a good boy. So yeah, I like to think we are diversifying a bit, and I'm happy with the stuff we're working on. So it's all good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as somebody who makes videos about game design, I can certainly attest to not chasing, the current popular trends when it comes to YouTube.
Yeah, well, if you're chasing a trend, you're already 2 years behind the trend, right? If you're like, that's people who tried to make battle royales after battle royales already kicked off, or people who were trying to make Among Us style clones after Among Us already kicked off. We made money, 2 years before Among Us. So yeah, if you're capitalizing on a trend, whether even retro shooters are hot right now, even though they're like not a moneymaker, but like if you're making like a Doom style, Dusk style now, people like call them Dusk clones, which is crazy. Style game, you're kind of you're past the peak of that. And there've been a lot of discourse lately, like is our boomer shooters, oversaturated and stuff like that. But I mean, listen, I love all of them, and I get pitched every single one. Like if there's a new retro shooter that's like announced, I've already played it. Right, the developers already talked to me, and that's really cool. I like being the like the president de facto of retro shooters. And I love giving feedback on all these games and playing all these games and getting to play them before other people. I wish I could like fund and publish them all. That is just not our business model and stuff. But I definitely wouldn't tell people to stop making them. I think they're all great. I think it's great that we have these games back. This style of game, whether or not there's too many of them now, who gives a shit? There's too many pixel platformers too. Is anybody complaining about that? No. So I say make as many Doom and Dusk clones as you want. I don't care how much they blend together or the names all have hell and kill in the fucking title, whatever. Just I love it. I'll take it over Metro. I love a good Metroidvania, but like you want to talk about saturated genres? Come on.
Just so much to unpack with that last one. Yeah, there's never people never complain about pixel platformers. No. And I'm glad that you talked a little bit about kind of like modern retro shooters. Because that was going to be like the next question I wanted to ask you about. Because again, like you just said, like when we last spoke 3 years ago, that was kind of like at the start. Like pretty much like the only one that was really like we heard of was of course Dusk. And since then, we've seen so many more. And again, you've probably played all of them just as I played just about every pixel platformer that any developer has sent me. And I guess my question for you then is, given like just the sheer amount that you've seen, I guess what do you think kind of like what makes it a game that you want to publish? Like, what separates, like, all the ones that you've played from, like, the ones that you're like, I want this to be part of New Blood?
Like, we don't do that anymore, right? But when we were, like, when we picked up, like, I think, Fallen Aces and Ultra Kill, right? Those were outside developers that are now part of New Blood, right? With Ultra Kill, it was something very different, right? It wasn't just, where, there've been so many games that have been like, well, it's kind of like another Dusk or it's kind of like another Medieval. It had to be something different. With Ultra Kill, it was obviously that character action game influence, right? The Devil May Cry type stuff, and then as well as for me, it's really a lot of attention to detail, and I use the word subversive a lot. where the game looks like something on the surface, but then you actually get into it and there's so much more to it. There's story, there's characters, there's narrative that you didn't expect in a game like this. Some people think that, all it takes to make a great retro shooter is just move really fast and shoot a lot of enemies and there's a lot of blood and keys and doors and maze-like levels. And like that'll only take you so far. You need a lot more than that to really make a game that, people remember. So Ultra Kill had that for sure. And now, it took me a while to convince the guys to bring on Ultra Kill because they didn't get it. They didn't. They played the first few levels and they're like, it's a bunch of orange levels and it's got a style meter and stuff. And I'm like, you got to really get into it. You got to wait. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Just trust me. I really like this Hakata guy. He really likes us. We're going to work on it. Just fucking trust me. And now they don't question my judgment anymore with the success of Ultra Kill since then. But it took a while. I had to go through with Hakata and really rework the intro to the game to make sure that people got to the part where it really opens up and you start to realize this is more than it appears on the surface. With Fallen Aces, obviously, it was Trey. We wanted Trey. We love his art. And he's a really cool guy, and he lives near David and the other guys in Pennsylvania, and could always have more people from the same area, right? And Fallen Aces, obviously, which I think was called Fallen Angels at the time. I really didn't like the name. We had to come up with a new name. My buddy Aaron helped me come up with Fallen Aces. And it was, as if you look at it, it immediately stands out because of the art style, right? And another thing, it was a brawler. And there's been a lot of retro shooters, but retro brawlers or brawlers in general, first-person brawlers are very rare and very hard to do. And we're all big fans of Condemned and stuff like that. When you combine those things, the fact that it's part immersive sim, it's mostly a brawler, it's got this awesome comic book art style, and Trey does really good work. We also wanted Trey to come in. He was doing concepts for Gloomwood and stuff. We're like, well, we'll bring you in to work with us and we'll make your game too. It was kind of a no-brainer, and it definitely stands out from the other games, right? It's like, well, how can you work on two immersive sims? But nobody looks at Gloomwood and Fallen Aces and thinks they're alike. They're very different games, even though they're kind of in the same genre. So it's what we've realized is it's about the people, right? We want to bring in people. So with Ultra Kill, I really wanted to work with Hakata, and he really wanted to work with us, and plus the game was great. With Aces, we really wanted to work with Trey. With Gloomwood, I really like Dylan. Dylan helped David finish Dusk. And I played, he sent me a demo of Gloomwood and I played it and I immediately got it. I've told this story a lot where I touched the first doorknob and it was like that little bouncy thief doorknob. And I was like, oh, that's a thief. It does a little jiggle, when you touch a doorknob and thief. And I was like, oh, this guy knows his shit. And now he's on a GDC panel with like guys from Arcane talking about immersive sims and shit, which will be cool to see.
Nice.
It was really more about the people than the games, which I think is important because no matter how cool a game is, if you don't work well with the people making it, you're not gonna make a good game together. Making games is like a band. I often talk about Dusk is a band, right? Me, David, and Andrew, that's the band. And without any one member of the band, the songs suck. So that's really what it's been about for me with bringing people and projects into New Blood. And the hard part has been like not bringing more people in because my QA leads, Dave's like, please, no more games, please. We really, our goal in New Blood, like our dream is to make one game together. We want to just work on one game instead of like 7 games. We'd all love to work on like one. But who knows when that'll happen or if that'll happen. But yeah, so that's really where it is. I mean, I never say never. People are like, oh, you don't publish games anymore. You're not bringing anybody else into New Blood. Oh, I really, I'd love to, work with you guys. I'm like, never say never. But I'm trying really hard not to focus on the stuff that we've already got going on.
And like trying to like focus on like the people in this too. I think that's a really good point for a lot of developers because we've seen like over the last 10 years, especially like the last like 5 or 6 years in particular, just the amount of creativity and I think level of skill from the independent scene. And it's been just fascinating to see people like who, like you said earlier, with a lot of the games from New Blood that would probably never get like past the initial pitch at a major publisher. Yeah. And like they're making these fantastic games. And I'm sure for you, for me, for everyone watching us live record, we can think of several or a lot of games that are just fascinating titles that we would never have seen anywhere else, and it really comes down to those people behind it.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about, being able to do everything yourself these days. You can just throw your game up on Steam. You don't need a publisher to take 50% of your fucking revenue or whatever indie publishers take these days, which is nuts. I didn't know it was up that high. We don't take that much shit. We don't take half of that. But yeah, I think a lot of these games where it's like, yeah, like a big publisher wouldn't give it a second thought, and if they did, they'd hold you to some crazy schedule, so you'd have to rush it out, and it would come out, and it wouldn't do that well, and then they'd forget about you. Like I've seen a lot of these retro shooters and stuff like that get picked up by these mid-tier indie
Mm-hmm.
publishers, and next thing you know, the guys are like a few months later, they're tweeting about how they're broke and stuff like that, and can't afford to work on their next game. Like, didn't your game get published? It was a cool game. What the
Mm-hmm.
fuck happened? If you have a good game and it gets picked up by a publisher, you should not be broke. You should not be anywhere near broke.
Yeah.
So that upsets me to see shit like that happening. I think there's a lot of predatory behavior amongst indie publishers and mid-tier publishers. They just want to grab whatever cool game, throw it up, take their cut, and move on to the next one, and they don't care about the developer or the game very much.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to make some revenue off of it. That makes me sad. Like I was saying earlier, I wish I could, publish
Mm-hmm.
everybody's game and give everybody money, but we can't. Not enough time and money in the world. So that bums me out. But I
Yeah.
think in the retro shooter space, the space that we kind of operate in, I think developers are, doing okay. Hopefully, at least, everybody making all these retro shooters can make a living out of it. Even if you don't have the next hit or the next dusk, you build a little community, you make a little money, and you could make the next game. That's really all anybody ever wants to do, is just do well enough to
Yep.
have people put out a game, have people like it, and do well enough to make another one, and keep doing that, and I don't know, until you retire or die.
Yep. And yeah, like I do like a Steam store page review show from time to time here on the channel. Where I review indie developers in terms of their store page, about how where they're doing in terms of marketing, and if the store page is good enough that will get people interested in it. And for a lot of them, like I've seen like a lot of indie games that have publishers or they get support like that, and like the store page does like it's like questionable. What did the publisher actually
Yeah,
did for this
yeah.
game?
There's like,
Exactly.
sorry, dog's barking. So, ouch. One sec. Sorry.
Oh, you're still muted. Oh,
Okay.
there you
Yeah, I think there's people washing my house. I think they drove back into the driveway. So I'll go sit down. Ruh, ruh, ruh. Um, so yeah, like a lot of times you go to these Steam pages for people that got picked up by publishers. Like there's no announcements, there's
go.
no
Mm-hmm.
gifts, the trailer's old, the screenshots suck, the description doesn't help. It's just like this is like easy shit. Like
Yep.
that's your people forget. So like publishers will focus on like influencers and social media and forget about like the store where the game's sold. Like that's like imagine if you got to like you were a fashion designer and you got to put your clothes in the front window of like Saks Fifth Avenue or some shit like that, right? Or like a department store and you get to the window, but you were more focused on the people inside who were like, working at the counter telling people about your game, but like you forgot to like put the clothes in the window and make it look nice. Like that's the most important. Like that's where people actually like your Steam page is. That's your store. That's your storefront. That's where
Yep.
people are going to buy it. Like that is they're going to decide within 5 to 10 seconds whether or not they're going to click on something else or click on your game. There is nothing more important than that. No tweet, no fucking Twitch streamer or YouTuber is more important than your store where the game gets bought. And it's just like it's so simple. It's like fucking selling shit 101, and people forget about it. And it's
Yep.
like, what is your publisher doing for you? And it's just wild for me to see.
Yep.
It is what it is.
I know. It's why I try to cover as many indie games as I can to try and get the word out about them, because
Yeah.
it is incredibly tough out there for a lot of developers.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of breakthrough hits as well. A lot of screenshot Saturday stuff will get picked up, and next thing you know, like everybody's talking about games like Townscaper. That was that fun little toy where just plop up and everything, and that was huge for that guy. And I love projects like that, stuff like the Ramp, where these guys just work on a game for 6 months to a year and put it out and they say, that's it, there's the game, and it gets sells tons of copies and gets tons of reviews, and they work on to the next one. Not every game needs to be some magnum opus that takes 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
Yep.
We struggle with that, obviously. Gloomwood's gone through a lot of different iterations and a lot of work until we finally hit our stride with it. It's been in development for like 4 or 5 years now, but we're not in any rush. And I don't want to be in any rush. We take our time with stuff, and we might not be as profitable because of that, but we're real happy, and our customers are real happy, so I'm good. I sleep real well.
There you go.
Like baby.
A question came in earlier from Drango. They ask, what game had the biggest impact on you in general, and are you looking forward to any upcoming games?
Biggest impact on me, obviously, stuff like Doom, Fallout, the old Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy VII. I love a lot of JRPGs. It's been a while since I played one I really liked, probably Yakuza 7. The old PlayStation 1 JRPGs, obviously the old, the shooters from the Doom era, Doom, Quake, Duke, Heretic, Hexen, Unreal, all that stuff, obviously. Then Half-Life, Deus Ex, all that stuff. And then what was the second question? What am I looking forward to? Fuck, am I looking forward to anything?
I don't know.
I barely have time to play our games. I don't know. Am I looking forward to anything? I don't know. Elden Ring looks cool, but I've never played a Souls game, so. Am I looking forward to anything? I don't know. I don't think so. No, I'm looking forward to finishing our games.
Yeah, I'm like the same way. People ask me what games are you looking forward to? I'm like, I have 3,000 games on Steam. I'm not looking forward to anything.
I don't have time to play the games that I have. I guess maybe the Breath of the Wild sequel. That I love Breath of the Wild. That was my favorite game of 2017. I'm a big Zelda fan. I love 2D Zelda more than 3D Zelda, but Breath of the Wild was great. So yeah, that I guess.
I'm looking forward to Elden Ring. That's again because I've played all the Souls likes or most of them, and people want to see me.
I'd really like to play Bloodborne eventually. I assume they're bringing it to PC or at least PS5. Yeah, I think they will at this point. So that's the one I think I need to play. And if I really like that, maybe I'll play Sekiro and then Elden Ring. Who knows? I don't know. I've never, those games have never really appealed to me. It's not my thing. I don't know.
I guess going back to something you said a few minutes ago about looking at games that are subversive in some way, shape, or form. That I think has always been the strength of the independent scene. Being able to take some crazy idea that you've never seen before and make that work. You mentioned, of course, games like The Ramp, Townscapers. I mean, we can even go back to something like Stardew Valley that someone just said, hey, I want to make a Harvest Moonlight game for the PC.
Yeah, and now there's a ton of them. Publishers are funding the shit out of anything that's kind of like Harvest Stardew Valley. But at the time, nobody thought of it. And a lot of you got to do something different. Don't try to do something better than something that already exists. Do something but different, recognizable but different. All of our games are kind of, reminiscent of, retro classic games, but they're different. They're new systems. There's things they couldn't do in 1995 that we can do now. Yeah. So I mean, all that comes from the indie scene. At the AAA scene, you're just getting sequel, and then everybody's just merging. Microsoft will own everything. So,
pretty much.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about with some of my favorite games. We use the term around here safely extreme. Games have to be, you said recognizable but different enough to stand out. Even my top 10 games of last year, I feature a game called Library of Runa, which is this crazy visual novel deck builder, and it is I think it's always been one of the challenges of indie developers is making that palatable to new people. You said a few minutes ago regarding Ultra Kill and redoing the intro. So I guess in your opinion, what do you consider to be like a good way to make a game approachable to somebody? Because I remember when we last spoke regarding Dusk, like Dusk was designed to be a 90s shooter. Like if you don't
Mhm.
like 90s shooters, you're not liking Dusk. But like with games that are like subversive or different in some way, I guess what are your thoughts on making that more approachable? Because I'm sure a lot of developers are very curious about that one.
I think that the key is accessibility. And when I say accessibility, I don't just mean, in terms of like disabled people and stuff like that. I mean, just making it a game that's easy for anyone to get into. Obviously, people who are fans of, 90s shooters like Doom and Quake and stuff are going to get it, but there's people who weren't fucking alive then, who are
Mm-hmm.
seeing these games and, oh, that looks cool. You get to run around really fast, carry a lot of weapons, and making it so anybody who's new to the genre can also get into it and learn and have fun. So much so that we put it on Nintendo Switch, and it's like it's amazing to play on there. Just as good, if not better, than the PC version, which is wild. I mean, it took us a long time. So I think accessibility is the key. Letting people, get into your games, teaching them how to play the game, just simple things. Making sure the difficulty ramps up, making sure you're introducing things at the right time, new enemies, new weapons, and giving them an experience that is fun for both, players who are used to this genre and players who are new to it. That's the key. If you're making a game that's just balls hard from the get-go and really confusing, people are gonna
Yeah.
they're gonna fall off of it quickly. It might look cool, it might play kind of cool, but if you show your whole hand in like the first two levels, what are you gonna do for the next 28 levels? Um, so I think the key is, and making sure there's something under the surface. If your game is exactly what it looks like, that's cool, right? If it looks like a crazy retro, bloody, fast-paced shooter, and that's what it is, cool. But there needs to be something more than that under the surface to keep people with it. And I think all of our games have that. Um, so I think that's really the key. And attention to detail, people appreciate that. Everything I have, pretty legit OCD and I harp on the details, everything from the moment you boot up one of our games to the time the credits roll, making sure everything flows really well
Mm-hmm.
and you have a really good experience, from the amount of time it takes for the logos to go on screen to the sounds that it makes when you mouse over certain buttons, all that stuff matters. And if you play AAA games, all that stuff is in there. And a lot of indies forget that kind of stuff. Attention to detail really matters to elevate the experience beyond just a bunch of enemies in a room, move around, shoot fast, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
So I think if you're making the kind of games that we make, you have to. And I play them all. And when one comes across my desk that really has that attention to detail, I'm like, okay, this person gets it. This guy or gal, they really care about the game that they're making.
Yeah.
They spend the extra time. And that's the kind of things that I've noticed with our developers. David, Dylan, Hakita, Trey, Airdorf, obviously. Faith. Um, I knew Faith was a thing, right? Everybody knew
Mm-hmm.
Mortis. Faith was a big deal before I even ever heard of it. Um, and I knew I wanted to get more into horror games, and David was buddies with Airdorf, and he recommended him, and I knew Faith was a thing, right? I'd seen like Jesse Cox play it and shit. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 had all these, millions of views on YouTube from all these people. And I saw it, but I didn't. If you just look at Faith, you're like, okay, it's like a Commodore 64 Atari style horror game with some cool like rotoscope cutscenes. Like, well, okay, why is it such a big deal? But you have to play it. You have to get beneath the surface. You have to get
Mm-hmm.
into the story, read the notes, really see how much attention to detail that Airdorf, puts into this shit, how much research he does into the satanic scare of the 80s, how much work he puts into just the simple stuff like the puzzles and the different endings, the notes that you pick up, like you play Faith Chapter 1, you're not sleeping well that night.
Yeah.
You're seeing Amy Martin at the end of the bed, that's I played it and I played through Chapter 2 and I was like, oh, this guy is kind of a genius. So then, we brought him in, and I think everybody at New Blood who we've brought in kind of has a little bit of that. Um, so I think that's what's important. People that really aren't just jumping on a fad, that they really care about the kind of games they're making, and the setting. Trey, obviously, with Fallen Aces, really, really likes 1940s gangster shit and brawlers and, that kind of stuff. Like he owns a Tommy gun. Um, Dylan really, really, really likes Thief. He knows that genre better than anybody, and people follow him because of that. Um, yeah, I mean, Hakata knows stuff like, character action games like Devil May Cry better than anyone. And so he knows how to merge that with the retro shooter stuff that we're doing with Ultra Kill. Obviously, Erdorf knows horror really well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think we're special in that regard. Plus, the thing that we have, which people ask me about a lot, is that everybody collaborates on all the games at New Blood. So we work out of one Discord, and everybody sees all the channels. We have a weekly meeting where we all discuss our updates, and everybody gives input and feedback, and everybody respects and appreciates everybody else's feedback. Leon from Medieval will have an opinion on something that Hakuda's putting in Ultra Kill and be like, "Oh, that's a really good idea." And the same thing with Aces and Dusk and Gloomwood and all that. And it's really good to get those different sets of eyes on your project, especially when you're an indie team of 1 to 2 to 3 people and you're just in the weeds with your game and you get to the point where like, I don't even know if this is good. We're like, well, we've got a whole studio of people who will let you know what they think and if it could be better or worse. And the iteration we have is really cool. So I think we're unique in that way that almost everybody at New Blood has had some impact on some of the other games at New Blood, even if it's not their game. And everybody really respects everybody else's opinion and values it. And I think that's rare and awesome and cool and important. And it wasn't like by design; that just happened. We ended up with a bunch of people who really like each other. It's New Blood's like one big group chat. Just like a bunch of friends hanging out, just making games, which is like the dream, right?
Yep.
But I founded New Blood with my friends, but like I didn't ever think it would be like this. We knew shit just kind of happened and it worked out. So I think as long as we're learning lessons about the kind of people we like to have and the kind of games we want to make, then we'll keep doing well. I hope so.
Yeah. And like with your point about that attention to detail, like that is something that I harp on constantly with a lot of my design videos about the UI and the UX of a game, the approachability of it. And it is something that I see a lot of developers either they don't know these rules or they choose to ignore them. And it's often that difference between a game that does really well and a game that just it disappears. Like it comes out,
Yeah.
it gets maybe 20 reviews, and then we never hear
Yeah.
or see it again.
Yeah, the attention to detail, they say, don't sweat the small stuff. I say, fuck that, obsess about the small
Yep.
stuff, because all those little small things add up to a big thing. If you harp on every tiny little detail in your game, and I know that it takes time and, time is money and not everybody has the benefit of that we do.
Mm-hmm.
If you obsess about all these little things, at the end, you're going to end up with one really good thing because
Yep.
you obsessed about all these tiny little things. It's the sum of the parts.
Mm-hmm.
You're only as strong as the weakest link in your chain, or whatever the fuck that saying goes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got all this really cool stuff, but you forgot some other stuff, people remember the bad shit
Yep.
more than the good shit. They remember when they got frustrated. A medieval. I was looking through a medieval reviews earlier because I was replying to some for customer support, and there's we get a fair amount of reviews that talk about the platforming. They're like, "Oh, the game's great, but the platforming sucks." I'm like, "There's like 2 sections in the game that have
Mm-hmm.
platforming." But they're frustrating for people. So that's what they remember. They're like, great game, shit platforming, negative review. And I'm like, what platforming? The game has like hardly any platforming. But if that's where you got frustrated, that's what you remember. So, for me, the takeaway from that is, well, maybe we should have focused on those areas a bit more. And as we look towards the Black Labyrinth, there will be some sections with platforming because, it's fun to, jump between platforms and hit buttons and shit. It's a retro game. We're going to make sure that we try to ignore those frustration points that people might have hit in the original game. But, if, you got to obsess about all the small things because people are always going to find the one thing you hope they don't. And that's what's going to go in their negative comment. Like, well, fuck.
Yep.
So.
And it is, I think, tough for a lot of developers getting into the space who, like, a lot of people who get into video games didn't go to school, there's no, formal, license to make a video game. They just want to make something cool, and that's what they're going to do. And
That's great. It's the
yeah.
best part about it.
And like
it's easier than ever to make games and harder than ever to make money making games. But at least it's easier than ever to make them. Back in the day, like I don't even know how you would get started making a game. You couldn't just download Unity or Unreal Engine. That wasn't a thing in like the 90s. So now it's really easy, but it's really hard to get noticed and have a successful career with it. But it'd be
Definitely.
like that.
Hmm.
If you're lucky enough, Microsoft will buy you.
Yep, there you go. That may be the tagline for 2022.
Yeah, who knows, man? They're not buying us. Oh, maybe they are. Shit, that'd be sweet.
There we go. But you hate money though, so
I hate money, but everybody's got a price. If Microsoft offered me $70 billion, I'd be like, bye. I'd be living on an island next week, my own island. Be sweet.
there we go.
I'd call it Sellout Island.
There. Um, we do have a question that came in from Akuno. They ask, first one is, what are the main things you look for on incoming game pitches? And then for number two, how much do you think contacts in the industry matter when marketing slash selling your game?
Well, one, the first thing I look for in game pitches is a playable build.
Mhm.
Playable. Man, I be like, I get like PDF 20-page pitch decks, and I'm like, bro, get to the fucking point. Or like, let me play it. If like, I'd take a shitty playable demo over like a bunch of concept art and GDD type stuff that I don't want to read. Like, just show me what your game's like to play, or better yet, let me play it. Like, I'll tell you within 30 seconds if your game needs work or whatever. So the number one thing I look for in game pitches is a playable build. It doesn't have to be super polished, just something I can play, or at least something I can look at. Pitch decks are like, I don't know, kind of outdated. You
Mhm.
know, the second thing, what was the second question? I remember that I forgot.
How much do you think contacts in the industry matter
Oh
when
yeah.
marketing and selling?
Uh, I mean, I think they matter a lot in general. Just, a lot of the reason we've been able to be successful is because I've got a, Rolodex of contacts that go back 10 years from being in games media, then games marketing, and then, um, esports and fucking merchandise and all the different areas of the games industry I've worked in. So like, there's nobody somewhere I can't like reach out to if we need help with something. Um, in terms of like marketing and stuff, I mean, it always matters. I mean, it's always better if you can do something yourself. Like I do all of our PR and marketing like myself, right? We don't use any outside agencies and stuff like that. And we get pretty good coverage and stuff like that. But that's because we've built a reputation and we're already popular, and it's something I can do. There's no shortcut to that. I can't just send you our media list and you'd be like, okay, here, email everybody on this list and expect them
Hmm.
to cover your game. It doesn't work like that.
Yep.
I'd say the best time to start building that, list of those connections is yesterday. We've got a huge, or you just even like community. Like, how do I build a community? Fucking start.
Yep.
Back in 2017, we didn't have a Discord. We made one. And now there's 40,000 people in there. It's just over time. Same, just build these channels. And the one thing I would say when focusing on social channels and community is to pick a few and stick with them. So like we don't have an Instagram, we don't have a TikTok, we hardly use Facebook. We're very good at Twitter, and we have a Discord. And if you want to talk to us, that's where you go. And of course, the Steam forums and stuff. But like
Hmm.
we don't want all these different social networks for our games. If people want to come find us, this is where you come find us. And you can only focus on so much shit at a time,
Yep.
right? I don't. Every time we do a post about one of our games, I don't want to have to make a fucking TikTok video and Instagram and what's the one, Snapchat, and like
Yep.
we do Twitter, we have a Discord. If you have tech support questions, post them on the forums. If you want to talk to us, come to the Discord. If you want to tweet fucking memes at us, come to Twitter. I would say focus your efforts when it comes to social media. um,
Hmm.
and yeah, of course, contacts matter. You want to, keep a list. Every time somebody writes about your game or something, you're lucky enough to do that. Take note of the editor who did that. Take down their email address, add it to your list, and the next time you have an update, email that person. Be like, "Hey, you wrote about our game a few months ago. Here's," and they're more likely to cover it. You have to build a rapport with people.
Hmm.
It takes work. You got to put in the work.
Yep.
I manage our email lists and everything. I do that all myself, and it takes hours and hours and hours. But you got to do it, or you can
Hmm.
pay someone to do that shit for you, but it's going to cost you a lot of money, and you'll lose that personal touch. I've had so many when I was sending out keys for Dusk on Switch, and handling everyone personally. I had people, companies reach out to me like, we do this for you. We could do this for you. We have an automated system that does this with key mailers and fucking. I was like, no.
Mhm.
Like, sure, that would be easier, but you lose that personal touch that you get from me emailing every single one of those editors at those websites personally and telling them, sending them a reviewer's guide, sending them videos, bringing up their previous coverage. I take the fucking time to write everyone an email. It takes time, but it's worth it.
Mhm.
And uh, yeah, I reply to every email and DM that I get. It takes me a really long time. Whether it's a job application or a game pitch that we have no interest in, I make
Mhm.
sure to reply, even if it takes me sometimes. It's like I send people email replies like a year later, and I'm like, sorry, it took me so long. But I make sure to reply to every single one. I try to reply to every forum post we get, and it takes hours of my life every day, but that's my job, so I do it.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I need to start focusing more like social media. Like I have Twitter, Discord, and Facebook. I've been just thinking about slowly getting rid of the whole Facebook thing because I'm mostly on Twitter and Discord these days as well.
Yeah, and Facebook, like, so it's unless you like pay to, show your
Hmm.
posts to people, and nobody sees it anyway. I post our stuff there just because we've got the Facebook, and it's like, there's 10,000 people on it or whatever. But like, and sometimes the stuff will get shared, and like, I like to share it to my personal page. But other than that, it
Yeah,
doesn't do much for us. It's Facebook's for, I don't know, sharing your mom's meme recipes at this point. I don't know what the fuck Facebook's for. I literally just share like dog memes.
hmm
Yeah, Twitter is great for game development. It's great for giveaways. It's great for interaction with your players. It's great for like screen. It's great for getting your game noticed for sure. It's
yeah,
great for shit posting. Twitter's really good for game devs. I would definitely say that's the social media platform to focus on. Or don't just stay off social media. You'll probably be better for it. You'll be a happier person.
yeah,
And for community building, Discord, yeah, we use Discord. Discord's been a godsend, especially with the pandemic. We use it for, we were going to open an office in 2019, and then that never happened.
yeah,
And then we decided to just stay virtual. We've been doing great with it. We use Discord for everything. We've got three New Blood Discords: internal, external, and the public one. Um, and that's all we need to run the company.
yeah.
Um, and so can you. So I'd say, definitely, use Discord. It's a great tool. Use Twitter. It's a great tool. Other than that, I have no advice.
All right. A few more questions came in. Romantic comedy car crash asked about how many unique playtesters do you put through your games? How do you carry out your playtests? And they said another question, but I'll let you answer that first.
Yeah, we have a very dedicated QA team of about, I don't know, 5, 6 people, and then the rest of the company. So everybody plays the games, but we have a, dedicated QA team, which I think definitely sets us apart from other studios of our size. A lot of people tend to outsource QA. Oh, fuck
Hmm.
that. Nobody else who doesn't know your games is going to know what to look for in your games. Um, so we do a lot of testing, and we try not to put anything out unless it's perfect. So yeah, we have an internal QA team, and they are the reason New Blood games are what they are. What
Okay.
was the second part of the question?
Let me get back to it really fast. How do you carry out your playtest? Is it like a full Valve style recording faces, something different?
No, we just we play the games. We play the games and give feedback. When we find bugs and stuff, we use Trello for bug tracking and stuff like that. Um, yeah, just lots of testing and iteration and feedback, open feedback. We try to keep it before opening builds up to, the wider team, the smaller little teams. Like when it's Gloomwood, it'll just be me, David, and Dylan testing and playing first, and then we'll send it off to QA, and then we'll let everybody else play the build and be like, hey, did anybody else find anything? Anybody else have any ideas? Same thing where it's like with Ultra Kill, it'll be like, the Ultra Kill devs and me, and then we'll open it up to QA and then other people, and then back again to make sure we didn't miss anything. But yeah, it's just constant iteration, play testing, having fun. Also our games are pretty manageable, so it's not like we have like Call of Duty Warzone where we need like 1,000 people testing the fucking game. We're a small company that makes small games, so it's manageable with a
Hmm.
handful of people.
All right. And then their other question they asked: any interesting slash funny stories from you playtesting Ultra Kill or your current developments?
Um, any funny stories? Not really. I mean, everything's just kind of funny. We're kind of just shit posting all the time. Um, but in terms of anything funny that I can think of, not really.
Alright. And another question from Durango. They asked, "What what are the most or what is the most common mistake you see new developers make?"
Overscoping, um, lack of focus, um, performance, not taking enough time to look at your performance, being like, oh well, it works on my machine. Surely everybody else on Steam won't have any problems running it. That's like the most important thing, honestly, for like getting good reviews. If your game performs well, you're already ahead of the curve. Um, yeah, overscoping. Trying to make too big of a game instead of focusing on something small. Yeah, I would say that's number one.
Mm-hmm. And like the overscoping, I think that's always that issue. It's something that we've said a lot with the design videos and the podcast we do here. That as something that you said earlier regarding games being like 5 to 10 year magnum opuses,
Mhm.
and a lot of indie developers will rush into that as their first game, and
Yeah.
it most of the time it just doesn't work. Like people will, they'll throw up Stardew Valley or Darkest Dungeon or pick like any indie darling and manage to succeed, and it's like, yeah, that's like 5 examples out of 10,000,
There's
20,000.
50,000 games on Steam now, right? I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I first we did Rise of the Triad 2013. I was the marketing guy in that game. There was like 500 games on Steam when we put
Mm.
that game on Steam. Every new game sat on the front page for like 2 weeks on the main thing. It was crazy. Now now your chances of even getting on that main thing are like 1 in a million. Um, yeah, for sure. I'd focus. I love, like I said, I love seeing games like The Ramp and Townscaper when someone works on a fun little thing and sells it for like 5, $10 and then moves on to the next thing. That's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's so much easier to get if you do a successful small thing, it's so much easier to get your next thing funded or noticed. From the creator. It's like when you direct a good movie, right? It's from the from the director of this fucking horror thing you might have heard of comes this one. M Night Shyamalan hasn't made a good movie in God knows how long, and they still say from the director of The Sixth Sense and Signs. It's like motherfucker, that was 30 years ago. But you make one decent thing and people remember it. So and you get that name recognition.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you look at David now, David's got a great name in the indie space because of Dusk. And it's helped the games that he worked on before Dusk, and now his other stuff that he does even outside of New Blood. He announced the little horror game today called Iron Lung about like being in a submarine at the end of the alien world or some shit like that. And because he's got a reputation now,
Mm-hmm.
he can get eyes on that. People know, oh, David Szymanski from the creator of Dusk comes this other little fun thing. Um, so I would say definitely work on small stuff. Don't go, I don't know, don't ever make anything big. Every time we work on something, even like something like Dusk or Medieval or Gloomwood seems so huge at this point. I love still doing stuff like Dusk 82. Because it's just like, you're in and out in 6 months and it doesn't make a lot of money, but people have a lot of fun with it and you have a lot of fun doing it. And then we can do stuff like put it on Switch and put it on Game Boy Advance, maybe put it on Playdate. I really want to make games for that Playdate. I think they actually just opened up the SDK or something like that today. I saw an announcement. But I love doing fun shit like that. So I would say focus on stuff you can do. If you're a solo developer, focus on something small, get it out, release games. Prototypes aren't gonna pay the bills. Shipped games do. And it's so
Yep.
easy. All you need is $100 to put a game on Steam these days. So make something, make it as good as you can, get as much feedback as you can. You could do demos now, you can do early access, you can put stuff on itch, put it in, get a Discord, give builds out that way. There's really no excuse to not have a fun polished game by the time you're ready to sell it for money. And do that, get ship games, put out things, even if they're tiny little 5-minute games, who cares? Move
Mm-hmm.
on to the next one.
Yep. And like speaking about that, I guess what are your thoughts on kind of like the push of the whole games as a service? Like I just finished writing up my 5th book on free to play design, and the whole
Mhm.
idea of we release a game, but now we're going to work on more kind of the next 3 to 5 years on that game.
Yeah. I mean, that's not our business model, even though we do like to do updates post-launch for our games, just because, with Dusk, we've been updating it for 3 years at this point. And we're still working on stuff like the Steam Workshop and co-op, and then we'll probably do an expansion and a sequel. With a medieval, we're doing the Black Labyrinth. Especially when it's, fun stuff that you can add post-launch, whether it's something simple like Steam trading cards or Steam Workshop support. But as far as games, this like live service games, like I don't know, man. I like playing one game all the time forever. Sounds like a lot. There's people that play Destiny and nothing but Destiny. There's people that play, MMO. They people that play, World of Warcraft and nothing but World of Warcraft. I used to be one of those people. I played Fallout 76 for 500 fucking hours. And eventually, like it's those games really keep you on a treadmill, right? It's a hamster wheel of content that there's always something to unlock. There's always something you're working towards. And it's fun, and I guess it's satisfying in a way. Like I enjoyed my 500 hours in Fallout 76, but eventually, when I got off the treadmill a few months ago, I was like, I don't miss this at all. I don't think I can play other games now. I have time. As far as games as a service, it depends. I don't think I've ever known anybody, there's some great stories about people that have, met their spouse in an MMO or, had great experiences, but I'm not sure I know anybody whose life has been positively affected by playing a game 8 hours a day, every day, because that game becomes their life, because the developers make sure they're always drip feeding content to them like a fucking hamster in a wheel.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do I think of games as a service? Not for us. That's what I would say.
All right. And yeah, like again, like harping on this idea of avoiding overscoping and just trying to get a game out there. That like I get submissions from developers as well. Like I do a weekly indie showcases, and I basically say, you have a game, throw it to me. I'll play it on my stream. And there are a lot of games out there where, like something that you said earlier that really stuck with me, is that you can tell when a developer gets that attention to detail, when they understand the underlying concepts. And you can do that with a game that you don't need Unreal Engine, using a ray tracing based graphics to get that. Like I've seen developers who make amazing 2D pixel games. I've seen, again, a lot of great first person shooters, modern horror, and so on. And you can tell, I think consumers at a subconscious level, I think, get that they can tell when a developer knows their craft knows their craft in this way.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, as a quick time check, it is about 6:30 my time. I know we said about an hour and a half, so we have about another 20 minutes, give or take, for our time. So for the people watching us live right now, if you do have any questions for Dave, please get them in. I will be giving a last call for questions in about 10 minutes, and then we'll probably wrap things up shortly thereafter. But speaking about another thing that I want to mention, or kind of talk a little bit more about, regarding like the name of a developer. Like you mentioned David, of course. I think that's another really good example of this. And I think that's another really strong aspect when it comes to indie developers, is that they can get their name recognition out there. Like again, like we talked about Microsoft. Like if you ask somebody, who made a game for Microsoft, who the hell knows? And you have like 32 different studios that they're all running. But if you say, who made a game from the DreadX collection, or who made Dusk, or pick any other game, you can easily, or mostly easily, find those people. And as you say, like when your name starts getting built up like that, it does draw interest. Like again, like when I hear a game from New Blood being announced, I'm like, okay, I'm wishlisting because, well, I like their last 3-4 games I played. Yeah. Chances are I'm gonna like the next game they've announced.
Yeah, it all and that's very much by design. We every game we do, we try to obviously capitalize on the name recognition and the reputation of our other games, obviously, and they merchandise well together, which helps. So like we sell Dusk and Medieval and Ultra Kill together as a trilogy. or just Dusk and a Medieval, and like they all help each other sell because if you liked one of our games, you're probably gonna like these other
Yeah.
two. And I mean, a lot of our whole fucking shtick is just like, remember these things? Oh, if you remember these games, you're gonna like our games. Remember Doom? Remember Quake? Well, boy, have we got games for you. So yeah, and I think, and that takes time, right? There's no, like, again, there's no shortcut to getting name recognition or having a good reputation. You just gotta, it takes time.
Yep.
New Blood's been, we've kind of only been the New Blood that people know for 5 years, 4 years, 5 years. We really started to come into our own around 2016, 2017 when we unveiled Dusk and then a Medieval, and then it's kind of snowballed since then. But over those 5 years, we've done a lot. And we've tried to make sure everything is up to the same quality or better than the
Yep.
last thing we did. We always try to be learning and expanding. And now branching out with new genres, new platforms, consoles. But yeah, it takes time, it takes work. You gotta do the work.
Yep.
There's no fucking, you can't. If that sounds unreasonable to you, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I've been doing
Or let some publisher take 50% of your revenue, and hopefully they'll do the work.
Yep. I mean, I've been doing YouTube seriously for the last 4 years, and I'm now almost at 10,000 subscribers, and that's all on my own. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't get a managed partnership. I don't have 5, 10 other people making stuff for this channel, and it takes time. You have to build that name up. I mean, I get people who find me from videos I made like 4 years ago, like when I'm on my older, crappier camera, and I'm still like struggling to make a decent video. And they're like, "Hey, I like your idea." I'm like, did you really have to watch this video? You couldn't watch, something that I did.
I swear they're better now.
Yeah. I won't get to BB's question in chat in a second, but there's one other indie trend that kind of also leads into their question I wanted to ask you about it. And that is indie horror. Because this has been something very fascinating to me. As another interesting point, my last book was on horror design. I try to hit like every genre that I can. And like the indie scene when it comes to horror has been just very fascinating to watch.
Huge, yeah. There's so much.
And I guess what I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, again, I'm sure you've gotten pitches as well, and I'm sure you've seen these games. What are your thoughts on kind of like where the indie scene is going there? And what I mean about that is when we look at kind of indie horror 5 years ago, this was kind of the era of, pixel horror. We, of course, mentioned Faith, the Dread X people. And it seems like over the last, like, 2, maybe 3 years, we're now moving into, like, kind of the PS1, PS2 era of modern horror.
We're very much, I think everything's kind of going that way. Everything goes in cycles where we got to pixel art and then, 8-bit, then 16-bit. Now we finally come around to, like, PS1 fixed camera horror games like Resident Evil 2 and Silent Hill and shit like that. And that's definitely the trend right now. I mean, we're, Ultra Kill's, PSX style. I think that's definitely where we're going. And eventually we're going to come back around to like Call of Duty style shooters where you can only hold 2 weapons at once. And that's going to be like, oh, so retro, which is fucking hilarious. But it's true. It's going to happen. I mean, we're already getting some of that, with games like Hell Let Loose and stuff like we're getting, old school Call of Duty style games. But yeah, I think, the indie horror scene it's massive, right? And it's, we know a lot of those developers. And a lot of really cool little games and so many stuff like, if you watch like Alpha Beta Gamer, right? We were watching, that channel the other night, and there's always some like, some Silent Hill inspired thing that's, the one guy made, and here's my playable demo of it, and, hope you like it. And it's, they're always gritty and lo-fi, and they're all different. And there's so much of it, and it's, it's really cool. Like, I think it really started to gain more widespread attention with the Haunted PS1 demo disc that was a few years ago. And one of my favorites on there was Sauna 2000, which was funny because it was Finnish, and Hakata obviously knows the guy that made that because everyone in Finland knows each other, I imagine. And there's some really there's some really cool shit on there. People are like, oh, this is like there's wow, people are making like old school retro horror games like the ones they used to get on PlayStation discs. And that kind of really expanded into games that are now people like Puppet Combo who just put out so much stuff, and is finally turning his games into like full games and putting them on Switch and stuff. People like love this shit. People love that that indie horror aesthetic, that lo-fi gritty horror game that looked like lost horror games from the late 90s. But yeah, and that kind of snowballed into then our friends at Dread XP have launched the whole publishing label just for that kind of stuff. And people really love it. And there's everything from lo-fi gritty horror games to stuff like Sucker for Love, which is like an interactive Cthulhu dating sim that's got horror elements.
Yep.
And then David has obviously done some of that stuff with games like Squirrel Stapler, and now with Iron Lung. It's huge. Is it a genre where you're going to make a lot of money? No. But is it a genre where you're going to be able to get build a fan base? Absolutely. There's people. I mean, horror makes the world go round. Horror movies, they'll keep making sequels to every single horror franchise as long as they keep pumping out money. They made more Saw movies than they made fucking Halloweens at this point.
Yep.
Is that true? Maybe not. But it makes the world go round. And same with the horror games. You go into the horror section on Itch, and there's tons of cool shit. And there's going to be tons more. But in terms of where we're going with like that fixed camera, Silent Hill, Resident Evil style, yeah, that's what's up right now. I still think we're waiting for like The One, that game that really captures that like Silent Hill, Resident Evil, Parasite Eve.
Yeah.
And is a full game, not just like a prototype or a demo or a 10-20 minute thing on a haunted demo disc, like a full-on game in that style.
Yep.
I think we're still waiting for that, but that's where it's at right now, and it's cool. It's kind of like we consider kind of like a sister genre to the retro shooter thing that we do. And on top of Faith, I think we'd love to do some more indie horror stuff. And we've got guys who've got great chops at that. David and Erdorf obviously are very good at the lo-fi horror stuff. Atmosphere like nobody else. Nobody does atmosphere better than David, even if he won't admit it. He's terrible at taking compliments.
And if any developers are working on a Parasite Eve spiritual successor, please.
I saw that. I swear I saw something that was Parasite Eve inspired. I 100% saw it on Twitter, or maybe I dreamt it. But I am 80% sure that's happening. But who knows? So many of these games just, they become prototypes, they become demos, and then, the developer, that's the hardest part. Like coming up with new game ideas and making a prototype is the easy part. Finishing the fucking thing, that's the hard part. That's where you need like someone like me, like a producer, to kind of like keep you on track and get you through to the end. That's the hard part. Shipping games is hard.
Yes, it is. BB in chat asks, do you notice genre trends across all incoming pitches? Any genres you look for in particular?
I mean, the pitches that we get or that I get is all retro shooter stuff, right? So that's a trend, I guess. I mean, it's like it's not a money making trend. It's still a small genre, even though people think it's like saturated now. Yeah, a lot of people are trying to make a boomer shooter, so they say. That's a trend that I see, obviously. It's cool. It's cool that some thing that we're a part of has become a trend in its own way. That's awesome. I love the fact that there's a shit ton of them now, like because there used to be none of them. Kind of the same way with CRPGs and stuff like that. Before we had Pillars of Eternity and all that stuff. Like there were none. There were no isometric CRPGs for a long ass time, and I missed them. And now there's a shit ton of them, and there's too many for me to play. That's kind of the same way with this. So like point and click. Remember when there were no new point and clicks, and then Double Fine did a new one, and then there's a ton of them. Now there's too many to play.
Yeah,
which is great. I love that we're getting these retro revivals. Same thing with with these horror games. So do I notice trends? Yeah, cycles. Everything goes in cycles. Everything that happened 20 years ago is happening again, and it will keep happening like that forever in music, in fashion, in games.
Yep. And I'm glad you mentioned adventure games, because that actually popped up a thought I had earlier when we were talking about kind of like how many games of a genre being released. And I think something that you said regarding that making games for people who didn't grow up playing them. And I think that's one thing where the adventure genre has, I think, had some struggles with. That there are a lot of really great adventure games out there.
Games are fucking obtuse, man. Back in the day, adventure games were made to sell hint books.
Yep.
they wanted you to buy the hint book or call the hotline. And I played those, I love those games, but some of them were like, you could not get through the dig today. I couldn't get through the dig today, or missed fucking
Oh,
Christ.
Seventh Guess.
Yeah,
No.
so many of those, like even stuff like Day of the Tentacle, like, I played the remake, and Double Fine did a really great job with like the Day of the Tentacle and the full, all the remakes they did, Full
Yeah.
Throttle, Day of the Tentacle, Grim Fandango, and some of my favorite games of all time. And I was playing through some of them. I didn't get through any of them because like you forget that like how ridiculously obtuse these puzzles are. Like I would never think to use this and look at
Mm-hmm.
that on that. Like what?
Yeah.
That it's not. Back then we didn't have a choice. This was the game we had. We played 2 new games a year, and you either got through it or there was it. You couldn't just quit and open up one of your other 3,000 games on Steam. You got through the game, or you read the hint guide, or you called the
Mm-hmm.
hotline. And that we suffered through it, but
Yeah.
it was rewarding. Nowadays, people don't have time for that shit.
Yeah.
Also they could just alt tab out and fucking Google the answer to your puzzle,
Or
for the
just
most part.
watch the walkthrough on YouTube.
Yeah, or just watch the walkthrough. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think adventure games have been, for the most part, very inaccessible to people who didn't play those games. Even to me, because like I tried to replay through Monkey Island or Day of the Tentacle, and I played a few hours, and I was like, I don't think I enjoy this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave these in my memories.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like that was 100% a thing that happened. I'm still gonna buy, like I bought that Monkey Island Collector's Edition from Limited Run. Like I'm still gonna do all that shit. I've got my little Guybrush Threepwood around here somewhere that I got from LucasArts. But some stuff is, if you're not going to evolve the genre and make it comfortable for younger people who are used to iPads and shit, then you're not going to get more players than the olds, the people like me in your 30s and 40s who remember those games. You're going to get that audience, and that's it.
Yep.
You're not going to appeal to anyone else. Same thing with the retro shooters. Dusk is the biggest, most successful one because it's the one that you can, and it makes anybody feel like a rock star. Anybody can bunny hop
Mm-hmm.
around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Like bunny hopping is easier in Dust than in any other game that has ever had bunny hopping. And we don't really have to teach it to you. We even do it on Switch. Actually, we do teach it to you on Switch. We added a dedicated hop button because we knew it was such a cool, important thing that people aren't used to. So yeah, I think you really have to make your games accessible and make them comfortable for people who aren't used to games in your genre, or you're only ever going to appeal to people who played games like your games that they're inspired by.
Yep. And again, like for people watching, it's why I harp on the UI and the UX of a game. Because if that isn't right, it doesn't matter how bombastically awesome that game is 10, 20 hours into it, most people aren't going to get to that.
Yeah, and you got to teach people shit. I mean, especially with people are like, well, all you do in the game is like move and shoot. I'm like, there's still things you got to teach people. And there's still
Mm-hmm.
ways you have to teach. Like, you have to teach them, even if you don't, pop up a big, like Doom Eternal will be like, this is how you kill this enemy. You don't need to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
like you need to introduce enemies and weapons in a way that show you what they do and how they interact with each other. And you can do that organically. And you've got to show people stuff. You do need some tutorialization. I remember, I learned these lessons, back when we did Rise of the Triad 2013. We didn't teach you anything, including the fact that Q gave you a knife attack, and that was the only way to get out of nets that would be shot at you by Over Patrol. They shoot you in nets, and you can't get out of the net unless you use Q. How would people know how to do that? We never taught you that Q is knife. We never
Mm-hmm.
show you a keyboard that shows you the layout. So we'd watch YouTubers and stuff play the game back in 2013, and they'd get to a net and they just die slowly because we never tell you what button to press.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people that think like, oh well, they should just have to figure it out. It's like, no, just tell them what the fuck the button is. And you're only on the hook. One of my things that I teach people is you're only on the hook once. If you teach a player something once, you never have to teach them again. If they didn't learn the lesson, that's their fault. That's not your fault. You showed them the thing. If they went past your tutorial too fast or didn't pay attention, that is not your fault as a developer. That is their fault as a player.
Yep.
That looks awesome. Good job. So yeah, you gotta, even games that are as simple as ours, you have to teach people things. You have to teach them the system, and you have to show them. It doesn't have to, like I said, doesn't have to be as explicit as the stuff Doom Eternal does. But you have to Yeah, you have to show them what your weapons and enemies and systems do, or else they're going to get frustrated.
Yeah.
You're creating friction, as someone in a board meeting probably once said.
Yeah, like I've lost count the number of platformers that an indie developer makes that they don't tell you what the jump button is, and it's like,
It's like,
okay,
well, why wouldn't they just figure it out? It's like, it's different. Like, what if they were just playing on PlayStation, now they're playing on Xbox, and they got used to being X, and now it's AB? Like, just fucking, it's not a big deal to make a
yeah,
little thing to tell you what you have to teach people how to play your game. Like, imagine if you got a board game and it didn't come with instructions, they're gonna fucking figure it out. It's like, what? There's a bunch of pieces. I don't know what to do. Oh, you should be able to figure it out. You've played board games before, haven't you? It's like, no, teach me, please. I swear, it's not that, So that's there's I know every once in a while I come across someone who's like against tutorialization. I'm huge on tutorialization.
mm-hmm.
I love stuff like rolling tutorials.
Yeah,
Like we have an Ultra Kill. Obviously, it's a rolling tutorial. It teaches you the game as you're going through the level.
mm-hmm.
From the very first section, we just as soon as you land in hell, it's like punch and then slide, and then here's your gun. Here's how to use your gun. Here's how to stomp on enemies. Here's how to jump. Here's how to slide jump. We teach you all that, and then by the time you get to the end of the first level, it's like, cool, I've learned the game. I've learned the
Yep.
mechanics. We taught it to you in a fun way. So I am very big on tutorialization, and I preach it as much as I can. It doesn't have to be boring, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to interrupt your game.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I think a lot of people are afraid of, if we do a tutorial, it'll interrupt the game or take away from the gameplay. It's like, not if you do it right. Not if you do it in a fun way and build it into the game.
Definitely. We are about 10 minutes out, so for people watching us live, this will be officially last call for questions. One did come in from WB Thorfinn. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly. They ask, is there a contact to send a game to David? Do you have any pitch emails?
Who, to me or Szymanski? Just Dave at newblood.games.
Okay.
That's it. Dave at newblood.games. It's in my Twitter bio. Or just suedaveoshry@gmail.com. That's the old one we used to have. It's a fun one. If you want to sue me, so just sue Dave Oshry at Gmail or Dave at newblood.games.
Wait, if you do have a new email, I have to make sure that I put that one in because I've been emailing you the Sue Dave Oshry one.
Yeah, I mean, it all goes to the same place.
Okay.
So yeah, just that or Dave at newblood.games. It all goes to one inbox.
All right. So, I guess for me, in terms of wrapping things up, another question came in as well. I'll get that in a second. We kind of talked at the beginning about some of the upcoming projects from New Blood, but for people who tuned in late or anything else that you've forgotten, anything else, exciting or things you want to mention that's coming from New Blood in the coming year?
I don't know, more merch. We've been doing a lot of merch, trying to get a bunch of new stuff out. Really want to do plushies, more posters, toys, stuff like that. Because people love it and we love making it. I have shelves and shelves full of collectible shit. Everybody loves nerdy shit, and we've got games that are popular enough that people want to buy our shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to make more of that. Trying to start a record label for all the music that we do, and then artists that we like. And yeah, trying to maybe keep working on some of those unannounced teaser games that we showed. Obviously, everybody knows that my dream game is the isometric Fallout style CRPG that I'm slowly working on. I'd love to spend more time on that. The car combat game, our top-down shooter. But yeah, just look forward to us keep doing what we're doing. We take our time with our games, but they come out good. We love you and we hate money, or whatever the fuck I always say. But yeah, that's about it. Just follow us, and if you like our stuff, keep buying our games. Send us nice messages. Buy a T-shirt. Oh. We promise not to put NFTs in any of our games.
There you go. If you want to send me any random stuff as well, I will happily take it and fill up my wall behind me with it as well.
Sure, yeah, man. We'll get you some posters and stuff. We just we got to restock a lot of stuff. I need some. I'm missing stuff. Well, I've got the Axe of the Black Labyrinth on my wall, which is about as cool as it gets for our collectibles.
Nice.
There's only one of those.
A few more questions came in. Blake McKinnon Productions asked, what do you do to keep a developer working on a game? If things aren't going how they want, or if they feel like abandoning the project?
Hasn't really happened. I mean, everybody gets burned out. I think the reason why New Blood Games tend to keep it up is because I give people creative freedom to do like other stuff. and work at their own pace. Like there have been so many times where we've had lulls in development. I'm like, what's going on? They're just like, I'm in a funk. It's, like writer's block, right? So many times like I don't know where to go next on this level. I'm just gonna fucking, I don't know, play some other games and see what I can do. And I give people, I give them, sure, man, whatever. I try to set really loose deadlines and milestones. I'll be like, trade shows and stuff are really good for that. Stuff like PAX E3, even though it doesn't exist anymore. It's like, all right, we got to get a new update out for this Steam event or this show where we're going to show a new trailer. So like that's like loose deadlines. And then just dev support. A lot of times devs will hit roadblocks with a system they're trying to implement and stuff like that. We've got a really awesome dev support team who can solve pretty much if there's a problem in Unity or Unreal Engine that we can't solve, it's not solvable. We've got a really good dev support team there. So it's just like anything else in life, having a good support system. Giving people what they need, the room to breathe, to be creative. And I don't lock any of our developers into any exclusivity or anything. So like if David wants to and Airdorf want to go do some games with DreadX or whatever and work on that for a few months, like sure, as long as it's not getting in the way of like main games, it keeps your creative juices flowing, right? Like so David, just worked to announce this short horror game, Iron Lung or whatever, he worked on that in his spare time while he's doing Gloomwood stuff. It keeps his brain going, keeps him happy. If you force developers to just like, well, you got to work on the one thing, it's going to affect their work. It's going to be, colored by numbers. It's not going to have that personality that it needs to have when they're inspired. So I think giving people freedom and time is the best thing you can do. Yeah, that's I think a problem with a lot of publishers, which is why we're not a publisher. Is they'll just try to keep you to such a schedule. Like you have to have you need to provide us with development updates and update the game this many times per year. And it's like, or else we'll pull your funding. It's like, well, fuck, then you don't have a choice. We don't have that problem because I'll give you, within reason, as much time and space and money as you need. And life happens. I've had developers, where, a family member, or a dog or something dies and they got to take some time off or they have a health issue. It's just like, absolutely, whatever, take as much time as you need, whatever. Come back when you're feeling good. Everybody's in New Blood is supportive of everybody else. I think that's the key, to keep developers on track as to, everyone's different. You can't just be like, well, this is our blanket policy for blah blah blah. Like we're not a big company with like fucking 401ks and an HR department. We're a bunch of people working out of a Discord making the games we want to make. So, I think the key is just treat people like people, give them time and space, and have a clear vision of what you want to make. Be on their team. Don't be a kind of producer or director who's like, well, do this, and they go, well, why? It's like, 'cause I said so. You're not their fucking dad. Give them the time and space to work, and good stuff will come out.
Yeah. Like with the games that I play here, like I don't try here to play just like one game every day or cover one kind of thing because it's going to drain me just to look at one thing day in and day out. Like people like ask me like, how you play so many games all the time? Don't you get bored? I'm like, I switch between like 30 games a week. Like, how am I ever going to get bored of 30 different styles of games?
Yeah.
2 more questions, and then I think we'll wrap things up for the chat here. Dwango asks, what do you think the next big thing will be?
Besides Elden Ring, like the next big thing in indie games, I don't know. I think we're going to get a lot more PS1 style stuff. The next big thing, I don't know. Microsoft probably owns it already.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
I think we're heading. Yeah, I've said this a lot. We're heading to where music and movies headed with subscription services like Game Pass. Where in a few years everything's going to be, on a subscription service like Netflix or Disney Plus. It's going to be Game Pass and PlayStation Plus and fucking everything. My concern is like who's going to buy premium games anymore for $20 when you just pay $15 a month to have all these games from this subscription, which was the kind of the same thing. That's what happened with Spotify and Netflix. It's great for consumers.
Yeah.
but it's terrible for developers. Spotify is amazing for if you love to listen to music, and is fucking god awful for the people who make the music, who get paid pennies on the dollar per millions of streams. Unless you're, Taylor Swift, you're not really making money off of Spotify. And even I don't think she is. I think didn't she hate Spotify? I don't know anything about Taylor Swift. But yeah, so I think the next big trend is more subscription services. Like I love Game Pass, and I want to put our games on Game Pass, but I'm terrified of the fact that like if people are only playing the games on their subscription service or watching, kind of like people only watch movies on Netflix. When was the last time you bought a movie?
I don't remember it.
No, you just go on Netflix and see what's there, or Disney Plus or Paramount Plus. There's so many fucking pluses now.
Yep.
When was the last time you just paid $15 and downloaded a movie to watch? You didn't. What? That's crazy. Nobody does that anymore. So I think I do worry with all the subscriptions, even though it's great for consumers, who's going to just go on Steam and buy a game for $30 when they could, just play the games for free that they get with their subscription to Steam Plus or whatever the hell there's going to be.
Yeah.
So I think that is the next big thing, figuring that out.
Yep. And there's going to be a whole lot of that, I think, in the next few months, especially again with Microsoft, swallowing up everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I love it for AAA games. I'm like, sweet, Diablo 4 is going to be on Game Pass. Sick. I don't have to pay for, that's great. But, with us, with, people like New Blood who make $20, $30 old school, you pay the game, you play the game. And I want to get our games on Game Pass. I got to reply to Microsoft about that. But I worry, like, how do we sell games if we're not on a subscription service in the future?
Yep.
We'll see.
Yep. And one last question from W. Thorfinn again asked, I heard Dave say a while ago that demos are a nicety and actually bad for sales. Does he still hold to this?
No, that's changed. So like back in, and I think Valve had a lot to do with this. So back in like 2015, 2016, everybody was like, demos are bad. Now everybody's like, demos are good.
Yep.
And I think a lot of that has changed with the way that we sell games these days. Steam is very much based around now about wish lists and conversions, and building a community. And they've made new ways to get demos. So now they've got these demo events, and they've made it easy to have demos. And so now if you have a good demo, you get a lot of wish lists, and you build that community, and then you release an early access, and you convert hopefully all those wish lists into sales, and then you build that early access version into a 1.0, and all the wish lists you've built up from the demo and the early access now compound into your 1.0 release, and you get a bunch of sales from that, and then you do a few post-launch updates, and you've got a game that did well. That's the new meta, right? Yeah. But 5 years ago it wasn't. Back then it was like, well, demos, people play the demos and they don't buy the game. That's what the data showed. And I think people would go back and like say that, wait a second, the data was actually probably wrong. People were actually just putting out shitty demos. But that's what everybody was saying, including me, like 5-6 years ago. Demos bad. Demos cannibalize sales, right? People that play the demos don't buy the games. And now with the data shows the opposite. And at least even if you don't get a sale, you get a wish list, or you get a new community member, you get somebody who's active, or someone who the algorithm is now going to show your games, because the blessed algorithm, has now captured that person's information and says, hey, if you like this person's demo, you might like this other game you made. They played the Ultra Kill demo, you might like Dusk. So it's changed. So the new meta, at least for us on PC, is demo, early access, full launch, post launch. And that's how we build games with, good sales and very high review scores and happy customers and happy developers. Yep. So yeah, I think the meta for demos is 100% flipped. So yeah.
And again, it all comes back to the quality of the stuff you're putting out there. If you put
out a bad demo, if you put out a good demo, people we're going to buy the game. Put out a bad demo, they're not going to buy the game. And I've played both. Steam does these great events now, these Next Fest, which are awesome. I wish they were longer, because I don't have time to play all the demos. But I've found so many cool games through the stuff like that, and you can do all these tiny little festivals now. There's so many on Steam. Steam's great. I love Steam. As much as they do. Stuff like Realms Deep, the show that we do with 3D Realms and Night Dive. showcasing all these retro shooters and stuff like that. And if for people who like the kinds of games that we make, it's like it's a smorgasbord of it's an embarrassment of riches. There are so many awesome retro throwback style games to play, like the ones we make. There are too many, but is that a bad thing? No, absolutely not. There can never be enough until boomer shooters catch up to Metroidvanias. There will not be enough.
There we go. Yeah, like for Next Fest, I think I played 90 demos in like 1 week somehow. I still don't know how I managed to do that for the last one.
Oh.
But with that, I know we are just after 7 my time. You have to get going in a few minutes. So
yeah, I've got a meeting in a little bit.
So to wrap things up then, I guess for one thing, thank you again for coming on, Dave. And yeah, if you are free in the future, hopefully it won't be another 3 to 5 years or whatever how long it's been.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to come back. Thanks for having me again.
No problem. So for yourself and for the people watching us live and recorded, do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans to end our lovely little cast on?
Yeah, thanks for playing our games. We love you and we hate money. If you want to email me or tweet at me, like I'm here in my bathrobe most of the time. So hit us up and rock and roll.
All right. So with that, we're going to wrap things up for our cast this week. For those of you watching this live or recorded, thank you so much for tuning in. Do all the liking and subscribing people tell you to do. We have our own Discord linked down below, as well as my Patreon. If you're interested in my books on design, they are linked there as well. If you are a developer working on an upcoming game and want to come on and talk about it, I am always looking for guests. So feel free to send me emails and stuff along those lines. With that said, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where he's in the art and science of games. And Dave, again, thank you for coming on, and best of luck for New Blood into 2022.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right. So with that said, everybody, have a great rest of your night, and take care.